Fog patches are possible on Friday. Again, some brightness, particularly across northern Scotland. Should be fairly sunny for the Highlands across to Aberdeenshire. North Wales also may well see some sunny spells, but for most places it's just looking overcast and grey, as it will do into the weekend. Increasing chance of seeing some thick fog, but generally staying dry and cloudy, but also steadily turning colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, it's the saga that's dominated the MSM headlines these past 2 weeks, and at 10:20, former London Conservative mayoral candidate Shaun Bailey will break his silence exclusively about his Tory Christmas party storm, revealing his pain at having to step down from London's Police and Crime Committee and share his hopes of forgiveness. As Omicron spreads, the government, Sturgeon, Drakeford, the BBC and the Doomsday Duo are going to do all they can to cancel Christmas for a second year. I'll issue a plea to the PM to ignore the 100 Tory rebels at his peril in my digest before I get the thoughts of my superstar panel, the hospitality champion and social media sensation Adam Brooks, Daily Mail star columnist Amanda Platel, and royal and political commentator Daisy McAndrew. But am I wrong? Will you tolerate another lockdown because of the Omicron hysteria? Two outspoken and much-loved broadcasters, Dame Esther Ranson and Dr. Neil Fox, have two very different opinions on this. They'll duke it out in The Clash, where we'll also hear your views. Should we be looking to the Queen rather than MPs for guidance on how to deal with another COVID-compromised Christmas? I'll put that to royal author Robert Jobson in Crown Jewels. Has Project Fear shift targets from Brexit to COVID? And do you reckon terror is the only language politicians in the elite now speak? Spiked Online columnist Brendan O'Neill is today's outsider on that. Why are bitter Ramonas blaming Brexiteers for increased COVID deaths? You couldn't make that one up. My banner will tackle an outrageous claim in the media buzz. And should jail have been the only option for drink-driving Katie Price, who today received a suspended sentence after a horror car crash that could have killed herself or others? We'll debate that. Plus, woke remakes of classic works like Around the World in 80 Days destroying our culture. Rod Liddell is on the warpath in Uncancelled. And as always, I'll bring you the first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages throughout the show, and we'll crown another Greatest Britain and Union Jackass too. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. But I want to show you something to begin with tonight that you wouldn't have seen at today's number 10 press conference. So during the press conference, and I'll play you this in just a moment, you know, you had Robert Peston saying, we shouldn't even be allowed to go to the pub and we should be following the rules. But do you know, he was actually caught in this footage filmed before the press conference began, not wearing his mask. And then there you see, the moment that he knows he's going to be going live and broadcasting to millions, he puts it on. It's COVID theatre, folks, and I'm going to be calling it out. I'll have a digest on that coming up. And then my superstar panel. Tonight, Daily Mail star columnist Amanda Platel, making his debut, the publican and social media sensation Adam Brooks, and the political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. They'll take me on in just a moment. But first, the news at 9 with Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening, I am Polly Middlehurst and these are your latest GB News headlines. The Prime Minister has warned the doubling rate of the Omicron variant of coronavirus is now under 2 days in some areas of the UK. Boris Johnson says there's also been a 10% rise in the number of people being admitted to hospital nationally, week on week. More than 78,600 daily COVID cases have been recorded. That's the highest figure since the pandemic began. However, Boris Johnson says there's no need to change our Christmas plans as long as we take precautions.
We're not cancelling events, we're not closing hospitality, we're not cancelling people's parties or their ability to mix. What we are saying is, think carefully before you go. Are you likely to meet people who are vulnerable? Get a test. And I think that is very, very good. Make sure that there's ventilation, wear a mask on transport, and get a test before you go.
The woman who murdered 16-month-old Star Hobson in West Yorkshire has been jailed for life. 28-year-old Savannah Brockhill has been given a minimum term of 25 years. The toddler was assaulted and psychologically abused for months before suffering catastrophic injuries, which then led to her death. Her mother and Brockhill's former partner, 20-year-old Frankie Smith, was cleared of her murder but sentenced to 8 years for causing or allowing her child's death. Thames Valley Police says it's highly unlikely any further survivors will be found following a fire in Reading in Berkshire last night. One person died and a number of others are still unaccounted for. Witnesses say they saw people jumping from the burning building, and one resident said he had a miracle escape after leaping from the 3rd floor. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and arson. A double murderer who sexually abused the bodies of more than 100 women has been sentenced to a whole life term. 67-year-old David Fuller killed Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce before sexually assaulting them in 2 separate attacks in 1987. He was caught 33 years later after a DNA breakthrough. 50 postmasters found to have been wrongly convicted in the Post Office IT scandal have now received down payments of £100,000. The government says it's ahead of full compensation negotiations. Hundreds of people were prosecuted for theft, fraud and false accounting between the year 2000 and 2014 because of a faulty computer system. So far, 72 of them have had their convictions quashed. That's all from me. You're right up to date. Now back to Dan Wootton and Tonight.
The government, Sturgeon, Drakeford, the BBC and the Doomsday Duo are going to do all they can to cancel Christmas again, aren't they? And then January, and then February, and then probably Christmas 2022 while they're at it. As cases of Omicron, a variant that may well help to transform COVID-19 into nothing more than seasonal flu. But as the cases at the moment spread like wildfire, the push to terrify us all into staying home by stealth is in full force.
Wave of Omicron continues to roll in across the whole of our United Kingdom, with over 780,000 COVID cases today, the highest ever daily number reported.
This is a really serious threat at the moment. How big a threat? There are several things we don't know, but all the things that we do know are bad. And the principal one being the speed at which this is moving. It is moving at an absolutely phenomenal pace.
If now isn't the time for extra restrictions, when will be? And to both of the medics, can I ask you really straightforwardly, do you think it would be better if there were now more restrictions immediately, and should the public cut back on their Christmas plans?
The surge in boosting is not going to kick in for 3 or 4 weeks, but now is the moment when people are going to parties, they're going to the pub. Why aren't you more explicitly discouraging them from doing that?
So that's Peston, right, during the press conference telling us that we shouldn't be allowed to go to the pub. This is him before the press conference, not wearing his mask. And then, as you saw, the moment he went live on international television, the mask goes on. It's all theatre, folks. It's all theatre. I would say, too, after watching that, I've come to the conclusion the establishment really don't live in the real world. They're the elite, happy to be locked up and working from home in white-collar jobs because they live in expensive mansions in the country with highly paid tutors, able to educate their kids via Zoom. But Boris Johnson's humiliation by his own MPs yesterday should teach him one lesson. If he even thinks about locking us down again, his time as Prime Minister could be up. For months, our once swashbuckling Brexit hero has been controlled by doomsday sage advisors, cabinet COVID hysterics like Michael Gove and the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock, and a media that has realised fear sells. But he can no longer ignore the 100 brave Tory backbenchers who stood up to the man who secured so many of them their jobs in an election just 2 years ago. Only Theresa May suffered a bigger Tory rebellion since the war over Brexit. So surely, there can be no plan C now. We must learn to live with COVID once and for all, no matter how fast Omicron spreads. And we must stop ignoring the scientists who don't fit the panic now narrative. Folk like Robert Dingwall, a government COVID advisor from Nottingham Trent University. He's a sociology specialist who says Omicron may be no worse than an average annual flu pandemic. This is the words from him. The Omicron situation seems to be increasingly absurd. There is obviously a lot of snobbery about South African science and medicine, but their top people are as good as any you would find in a more universally developed country. They clearly don't feel the elite panic over here is justified, even allowing for the demographic differences and vulnerability, which are probably more than cancelled by the high vaccination rate. My gut feeling is that Omicron is very much like the sort of flu pandemic we planned for. A lot of sickness, absence from work in a short period, which will create difficulties for public service and economic activity, but not of such a severity as to be a big problem for the NHS and the funeral business. Look, that's not to say we won't take the massive increase in cases seriously, but it has to be down to personal responsibility and sensible guidance, not terrifying propaganda and new laws. Take regular tests, sure. Wear a mask if you want to, but it provides no path out of this nightmare. Get boosted now, as their slogan reads. Absolutely, if you feel comfortable to do so. Protect the most vulnerable, definitely. But it's now up to us to stop this 20-month COVID merry-go-round from hell, because our leaders are never going to. The Queen is planning to keep calm and carry on with her Christmas plans with sensible measures in place. Everyone else should follow her lead and do the same. But to respond now, my superstar panel, the Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Patel, the publican and social media sensation Adam Brooks, and the political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. Amanda, are we going to be locked down again?
No, I'm not going to be locked down, Dan. I just don't give a damn. I did my lateral test yesterday. I've been jabbed, I've been stabbed, I've been everything, and I'm not going to be. I think Plan C is all about creep. It's about fear. It's trying to make us feel as though if you don't do this, we're going to make it so horrible for you. And I'm taking no notice. I'm going to invite as many people, and tonight I will say it on television. I'm not giving my address. Anyone who wants to come
Can I come?
Anyone who wants to come around on Christmas Day, so long as you're jabbed, you're most welcome. And I loved, actually, Nicola Sturgeon, that overstuffed little haggis. I thought hilarious when she said, I'm only going to have close personal friends over on Christmas Day. So, like, one person.
Her husband, maybe.
You think he'll be invited?
Adam, look, you are obviously one of these people who is dealing with the repercussions of what lockdown actually means to business. And a tweet of yours went viral yesterday. I want to show you it, actually. It says, I'm sat in my pub at the moment doing some paperwork. It's 11 days before Christmas Day. Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, what have you done? What have you done? And that is because, as you can see, the pictures show a completely empty pub.
Yeah, so a lot of the time I do my paperwork in the pub rather than an office. And yesterday it was...
No customers?
I had two. I had one at the bar at either end, but...
So this is going to decimate your industry,
look,
right?
One thing people attack me for that tweet, saying it's a Tuesday afternoon, how busy do you expect to be?
My pub's busy on a Tuesday afternoon. The Hollybush.
You're always in there.
Yeah. But look, we're 11 days to Christmas, as I said in the tweet, and you would... well, I've had so many bookings cancel anyway. It's a pub that's supported by regulars, locals. It's a really popular pub. You'd expect more than 2 people in there. And it shocked me, to be fair. It's the last week, you know, my managers have been telling me a lot of the bookings have been cancelling. And obviously I'm in touch with my staff, but this is going to be a really bad December for hospitality, and especially pubs.
And there's no extra support for them. That's one of the problems. There's no furlough. There's no extra financial support from the government. You saw that Tom Kerridge tweet yesterday.
You know,
public
and that on the show,
659 cancellations, and those are the people who bothered to cancel rather than just didn't turn up.
That's the only phone that rings in pubs now, is someone cancelling.
Yeah.
And they've just taken none of this into account, decimating the economy, which at the moment is thriving. We're just coming out of the lockdown. And then suddenly the government's just wobbling everywhere, making everyone feel uncertain and basically saying, stay at home.
Do you know, this isn't... Sorry to interrupt. This isn't for fear. I don't want people to think that, you know, most of these bookings are cancelling for fear. It's fear of testing positive.
Well, I was just going to say that.
The inconvenience.
Because we had this critical day yesterday, didn't we, Daisy? Because it was the day that if you tested positive, you lose your Christmas if you continue to follow the law. So what you're going to find is so many folk do not want to go out for the next couple of weeks because they cannot fathom the idea of being separated from their family again at Christmas because of this 10-day isolation
I think you're going to have lots of really peculiar behaviour going on. So I think you'll have a lot of people who won't test, who won't take the test because they're going to be so... And that's really dangerous because then you'll have people willy-nilly going around not knowing whether they're positive. I mean, I've been trying to get hold of some tests over the last few days. Can't get any for love nor money. And any of my local pharmacists went to my GP, tried the online service. No tests to be had. And I do understand that the government is concerned. And even when I listened to the words of Professor Dingwall, you know, he did say, I have a feeling in my gut. And he said it may be like the flu. The problem is nobody knows. And at the moment, politicians want to be certain about things because they're so scared of it all coming back and being thrown at them and being politicised.
But Amanda, I think this is part of the post-truth world because we're at these press conferences watching the Chief Medical Officer, watching the Prime Minister say, ignore the science. They're actually saying, ignore what we're learning from South Africa.
Yeah, and disregarding South Africa as there's some sort of bloody backwater.
Yeah.
They're the ones at the forefront of this. I've got 3 friends at the moment who tested positive with COVID. None of us know whether it's the new one, which I keep calling Abercrombie. It's not called that, is it? What is it called? It's called...
Omicron.
That's the one. I've got 3 friends who've tested positive, and they've all had a flu.
Yeah.
And bit throaty, bit snuffly, bit
That's
more
more of a cold, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's have it. People that have flu are in bed.
3-day-old cold. And one of your fellow panellists, Carol Malone, she has a friend who's got it, and she still hasn't stopped shouting. You know, it's like, it's a cold. It's a bad cold.
I mean, Adam, the issue
Wouldn't stop me drinking.
No, and the issue is, are we going to perpetually shut down society for what, for most people, is a cold? When, and this is the key difference this year compared to last, if you are vulnerable, You have had the option now to have 3 jabs,
Yeah.
and also you can adjust your behaviour at this time of year. Come on, if you are particularly vulnerable, if I was particularly vulnerable, I would adjust my behaviour and accept that the rest of society has to go on.
In April last year, Chris Whitty said, we must learn to live alongside this like we do flu. We're not doing that.
No,
Now we've got a flu.
Boris Johnson said it.
Now we've got less than a flu, and they're telling us not to live with it.
Look, I don't know if it's fact checked. Didn't 60,000 people die in 2017, 2018, the winter?
There have been
flu?
winter flu seasons that can be that severe. There are other winter flu seasons where less than 20,000 die. But yes, in a particularly bad flu season.
I didn't know about that until COVID. So that tells you. I mean, the hospitals would have known about that, and we've got army medics. Surely, if we're short of nurses, if we're short of hospital space, the army could come in and help with that.
But this is one of the big problems, which is underlying all of this. Everything the politicians are constantly doing is to save the NHS, and nobody ever bothers to sit back and say, why do we have such a tiny capacity? Why in every winter in the last 20 years are our beds 98% full? Other European countries don't have that, so they have more wriggle room. And it's been so obvious for the last 2 years that that's what needs to be sorted, because I sympathise with the government that they are worried the NHS is going to be overrun, but we shouldn't be in that position in the first place.
Can I say something really terrible?
Of course. You always do. Anyway,
That's
whether
why
I
you're
give you
here.
permission or not.
I do not. What we're all skating around is that 90% of people who are in hospital with coronavirus are not vaccinated. Remember
those figures are disputed.
Okay.
And also, but certainly in the ICU, in intensive care, there is a very large
I don't think it's that even in ICU. I think that 90% figure, if I'm right, was for a specific few hundred patients that needed a specialist certain treatment, and I think that
I think okay, you're muddling up my point. Don't get in the way. You need to have a drink, sweetheart. My point is, I think they should open up the Nightingale hospitals, which they opened at the beginning.
That's why
open them up and put everyone.
The main point.
Everyone
who's not been
stats guy,
vaccinated.
just to bring some context to that figure, he actually was talking to me earlier about this 90% figure. And he says it's only based on 154 specialist care cases.
You're not
but
supposed
has
to
been
say,
used
"See, I told you."
extensively
Jesus.
to argue that unvaccinated are taking
That's
up
all I can
ICU
say.
resources and stopping operations. So, look...
But also in London, the statistics that have come out this week is that 30% of eligible Londoners still aren't vaccinated. So we have these really, really big pockets of areas, which is why London is doing so badly at the moment. So that's the thing that needs to be...
Well, I don't know. I've got a different view on this, because I would say prioritising jabbing healthy 20 and 30-year-olds with a third COVID injection when they may well have natural immunity is far less required than GPs being available to see elderly people who have discovered a lump, discovered a bump, or need to see a doctor. And I think the priorities are all wrong. But look, we're going to continue this discussion throughout the show. Amanda Platel, Adam Brooks and Daisy McAndrew, thank you so much. Coming up, as the Queen prepares for her first Christmas without Prince Philip in 73 years, should we applaud her for refusing to cancel her festive plans in light of Omicron? I say absolutely, but I'll get the verdict of royal author Robert Jobson too in Crown Jewels. But next, will you tolerate another lockdown because of the Omicron hysteria? Broadcasters Dame Esther Ranson and Neil Fox have strong views on this, and we'll be fighting it out in our clash. Plus, we'll get your all-important opinion too. Tweet me and vote in our poll at GB News. You can email me to dan@gbnews.uk. Can't wait to hear from you.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The forecast for tomorrow will be similar for the next several days, actually. Dry for the vast majority, but also fairly drab. Won't be completely dry tomorrow. There will be some rain across the north of Scotland being created by this weather front. But it's high pressure that is starting to dominate across the south, and over the next few days that high will continue to move northwards and control our weather through the weekend and beyond. That weather from those still providing some rain and drizzle over Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland through the rest of this evening. It's gradually going to work north overnight, so turning drier in Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, so maybe some drizzle over the mountains of Wales. generally a lot of cloud here, but with some clearer skies across northeast England, temperatures could get close to freezing, certainly in rural areas, and there could be some stubborn fog patches here, so through parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in particular. And if we do see some fog here, well, it may well last for much of Thursday. We should see that cloud and rain starting to pull away from northern Scotland, likely to stay fairly damp in Shetland for most of the day. But elsewhere, as I said at the start, it is generally cloudy but dry. Temperatures still a touch above average, although not quite as mild as today. And if that fog does stick around, well, temperatures could be very much more suppressed. Through Thursday evening, again, a few holes in the cloud could allow some fog patches to form, parts of North Wales and, again, the northeastern quarter of the UK. Generally just a lot of cloud across the south as we head into Friday. That weather front moving away from northern Scotland, so generally dry by the odd little bit of drizzle here and there. Again, some stubborn fog patches are possible on Friday. Again, some brightness, particularly across northern Scotland. Should be fairly sunny for the Highlands across to Aberdeenshire. North Wales also may well see some sunny spells, but for most places it's just looking overcast and grey, as it will do into the weekend. Increasing chance for seeing some thick fog, but generally staying dry and cloudy, but also steadily turning colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Rod Liddell, Brendan O'Neill and my exclusive interview with Shaun Bailey on the way, but time now for the clash. Critics of the government's Plan B measures approved by Parliament last night, despite 100 Tory MPs bravely rebelling, have branded them lockdown by stealth as terrified members of the public limit their social interactions in order to avoid spending Christmas in isolation, something the PM and gloomy Professor Chris Whitty applauded at today's briefing.
I really think people should be prioritising those things and only those things that really matter to them, because otherwise the risk of someone getting infected at something that doesn't really matter to them and then not being able to do the things that do matter to them obviously goes up. I don't think you need to be a doctor to think that. I think that's what most people are very sensibly calculating.
We're not cancelling events, we're not closing hospitality, we're not cancelling people's parties or their ability to mix. What we are saying is, think carefully before you go.
If the powers that be seem torn on whether or not to impose a lockdown, resulting in these half measures, they're not alone. A new poll by Savanta Comres shows the nation is split, with 51% of people saying they would support a 2-week Christmas firebreaker. So tonight, I'm asking you and a pair of straight-talking broadcasters with very different views, will you tolerate another lockdown because of Omicron? Tweet me and vote now in my poll at GBNews. And you can also email me on dan@gbnews.uk. But first, let me bring in the legendary broadcaster and journalist Dame Esther Ranson and the legendary radio DJ Dr. Neil Fox to battle it out. So, Neil Fox, you say no more lockdowns, you've had enough.
Well, I think we've all, Dan, had enough of lockdowns, but I think also, you're pitting us as black and white. Me and Esther are going to be polar opposites. I'm sure, like all these things, we're probably quite grey, and there's a lot more commonality because I am smart too. I've got a wife and 3 kids. I've got elderly in-laws. I don't want anyone to be hurt. We don't want anyone to be unnecessarily ill. But the thing that slightly scares me at the moment is, although there's no doubt that the Omicron variant is very contagious. I mean, one of my neighbours has got COVID at the moment. 26 of them went to her Christmas party. 24 of them have got it at the moment. It's ridiculously catchy, but none of them feel ill. Okay, she had a slight headache for a day. And I think what we have to try and work out is a year ago, things were completely different to where they are now. A year ago, there was no vaccine. A year ago, we hadn't been triple jabbed. And I have to say that where we are now, Christmas 2021, we just need some common sense and we need to put everything into context. We're hearing it's very, very contagious. I agree. But what we aren't seeing yet is a massive upturn in the numbers of people going to hospital. And thank goodness we're not seeing a massive upturn in the number of people that are dying, because those are surely the figures that really matter. As your panelist said earlier, and your guest earlier said, we have to learn to live with this thing now. Is what we've got now any worse than a bad flu or really bad colds? I guess we don't quite know. I can understand the government being a little bit cautious right now because last year, let's be honest, they got caught out and our Christmases got put on hold and cancelled. I didn't see my mum last year for Christmas. I won't see her this year because she's died in between, right? There are hundreds of thousands of people around the country that are going to be in that same situation. So we want a bit of caution, but we don't want to go insane. And I think what was interesting last night, 100 of the Prime Minister's own MPs didn't vote. Whether that's because they don't necessarily agree with it or they don't just agree in general with their leader at the moment is probably a different ballgame. I want a bit of common sense, but I don't want a knee-jerk. Put it in context. When the media every day go through the numbers of people that have been found to be new cases, can we also please put up there the number of people that are dying? And against that, put the number of people that are dying of Alzheimer's, of Parkinson's, of lung, of cancer, of heart disease, and all the other things that are really pushing COVID way down that list. That's my position.
Really good point. And so sorry to hear about your mum, Neil. Esther, my issue here is that we're in such a different position to where we were last year. Last year, I completely understand that someone like you that's in a high-risk category because of your age was not able to be protected by a vaccination. Within those 12 months, Esther, you can be triple jabbed now. And actually, the vast majority of the over 70s in this country, I think it's well over 80%, have decided to take up the option of a government booster to protect themselves. Over 96% of elderly people in this country have COVID antibodies. So why on earth are we talking about locking down again, given that completely different situation?
Because at the moment, we're fighting a war against an enemy we don't understand. That is the problem. Unfortunately, when you make comparisons with South Africa, it's not denigrating South Africa to say they have a totally different population. As Professor Whitty, known as Professor Doom to you, but Professor Expert to me, did say this evening, South Africa has a much younger population, and it's also got a lot more immunity in that population. So we're an aging population. Mea culpa, I'm one of the aged. And also we have less natural immunity. So what they're saying to us, we haven't got the data. The difficulty is, Dr. Fox, what we actually, not, as we know, a medical doctor, but a very eminent doctor nonetheless. The difficulty is at the moment that we really have to wait for a moment to see what the lag is. You see, there is a 2-week lag, as you know, between infection and case and death. So at the moment, the statistics are not showing a rise in serious illness and death, but it's too early to tell because this horrible thing has only been with us a couple of weeks. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm talking to my family about Christmas very seriously. We have some vulnerable members of the family who wouldn't be very well protected if they came across the virus. We have a member of the family who's a consultant who works with older people in hospital and says what she's seeing is tragic. So let's hold on to our horses. I know it's not for the clash to say this, but let's stay calm. Let's look at expert advice, because actually Professor Whitty has no particular desire to frighten you out of your wits. He doesn't particularly want to paint a dismal picture.
The past 20 months.
What he's trying to do is make sure that the service that he's responsible for will be able to provide the treatment for all the patients, not just COVID patients, but all the other patients too. And he needs us to stay healthy.
I mean, the problem is, Dr. Fox, I would say this year we have to allow kids, we have to allow young folk to be able to celebrate Christmas normally. And I think we've really got to think about vulnerable relatives. Absolutely. Take the lateral flow test before you go and visit them. Maybe do social distancing. I was in a care home the other day. And of course, I was incredibly careful in that sort of scenario. But I think, Dr. Fox, to deny young people a normal Christmas for a second year in a row is just morally unconscionable.
Well, I think it's going to be really hard all round. And it must be a very tricky set of decisions that have to be made at the top level in Downing Street, because you're balancing health, you're balancing the NHS, you're balancing beds, nurses and availability of resources. But you've also, against that, you have to balance society, hospitality industry, shops, events, an industry out there that's just getting back on its feet. And this time around, we know
poverty causes death.
Well, it does. And also, I think people talk a lot about the mental health issues here, but I do think that we got so close last year and then it didn't happen. I think we almost accepted it sort of quite happily, as us Brits tend to do last year, because we went...
We were on that warlike footing. I mean, I didn't think it was the right decision, but I think we accepted it, whereas I think, Dame Esther, a lot of people won't accept it this year. I'm getting lots of text messages, Esther, from friends of mine who are relatively young, who say to me, Dan, mentally, psychologically, I cannot take another lockdown. My mental health cannot cope with that. What do you say to them?
I say it's very tough. It's very tough for isolated older people. It's very tough, as we've seen, for vulnerable children. This is not an easy scenario, but let me just point out to you that one of the great pharmaceutical companies who've done so much to develop the vaccines. And thank heavens for those experts. You might call them doom mongers, but they saw the danger before anyone else and they started working on those vaccines. Thank the Lord they did, not because of a feeling in their gut, but because of feeling in their intelligence and in their scientific experience that it was necessary. Now those same people are developing drugs. And if we can find a way to treat this illness so that the people who come into ICU, whether it's because they can't have the vaccine or whether it's because they've chosen not to have the vaccine, which is tragic, isn't it? But if they can take a drug which actually hits those serious symptoms and means that they can be let out in full health and the economy can flourish and, you know, we can all live normal lives, that's what we hope. But we need those experts. Let's not decry them. Let's listen to them.
So, Esther, if you were at number 10 Downing Street right now, if you were Boris Johnson, would you put us in a form of lockdown?
I would say, let's wait until we've got the data. At the moment, I think the medical experts are going along with Plan B. I hope they are. I hope they're not being silenced or bullied or overridden. And don't ask me about those 100 MPs. My own MP here was one of them. And if I could meet him in the open air wearing
freedom
masks,
fighters, I say, Esther, they are great freedom fighters because there is no proof, there is zero proof that vaccine passports do anything to the transmission of COVID. I actually applaud them all. Why do you not agree that they did the right thing? They're looking at the evidence and trying to protect Brits' freedoms and civil liberties.
No, they're not. No, they're not. One thing they're not doing is looking at the evidence. We're not talking about medical experts. We're talking about people who have voted with their gut.
There's no evidence for vaccine passports. There's not. Even Sturgeon admitted they were hopeless. There was a 70-page dossier produced in Scotland, and she had to concede that there's no point rolling them out any further, unless, Esther, you just want to blackmail people into getting the vaccine, and then I guess that's a slightly different question, but that didn't work in Scotland either.
Blackmail, I call it nudge, but whether it has that impact or not, I don't mind. I mean, I produce a credit card. It's got a very unflattering picture of me, and sometimes it spells my name right.
Believe.
I don't worry about that. What I say is there is a tightrope we're walking here between lives and livelihood. I believe that the British public, given the right information in the right way, will do what the experts advise because it's not in anyone's interest.
I think they did, but maybe not now. But Neil Fox, final word to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, I think we just also have to temper all of that, Esther, with we need our freedoms too. And we need to learn as human beings now to live with a little bit of risk because we lived with a lot of risk for the last.
Because you get in a car, Esther, you get in a car.
The scientists have done a brilliant job and they put us in a position now, I think.
Driving license and I take a test and I drive on the left. Because the experts tell me that is the safest way to drive.
Well, look, it was a fascinating debate.
We will find a way to drive our way to safety and health through this COVID. I hope so, anyway.
Well, look, I love having you both. That was the journalist and broadcaster Dame Esther Rantzen and the legendary radio DJ Dr. Neil Fox. So who do you agree with? Jake on Twitter says, there was no reason to lock down in the first place. Everyone appears to have forgotten or memory hold the Great Barrington Declaration. Well, I haven't, because I had Dr. Jay Bhattacharya on last night, one of the co-authors of that declaration, and I think his approach is absolutely the right one. Alex says, we have to live with this for years to come. You can never 100% protect yourself from COVID, never will. The sooner governments accept this, the better. And Paul writes, we have to tolerate it to an extent because the government can introduce whatever powers they want, but I will resist as much as possible. And your verdict is now in. 88% of you say no, you will not tolerate another lockdown over Omicron, while 12% of you agree with Dame Esther Rantzen and say yes, you will. Coming up, is fear now the only language our politicians know? Spiked columnist Brendan O'Neill says we need to break the cycle of COVID terror in The Outsider. But next, should we be looking to the Queen rather than MPs for guidance on how to deal with another COVID-compromised Christmas? Royal author Robert Jobson weighs in on Crown Jewels straight after the break.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Brendan O'Neill, Rod Liddle and my exclusive interview with Shaun Bailey coming up. But first, the royal author Robert Jobson is here for Crown Jewels. And Omicron may officially be a variant of concern for the hysteria-prone, but not for the Queen. In a trademark display of resolve, Her Majesty has reportedly vowed to continue with her annual Christmas lunch, set to be held at Windsor Castle next Tuesday. The event was cancelled due to COVID in 2020, but with the Queen facing her first Christmas without her late husband, Prince Philip, in 73 years, I believe we should salute her for prioritising family and tradition and actually follow her example. Jobbo, do you agree?
Well, let's hope she can go ahead with it, Dan. I mean, the way things are happening, things are changing by the day or even the hour. You know, it does seem that way, doesn't it? But the most important thing is that the Queen's health is maintained, and that what she does do brilliantly, I think, is show the leadership. And whatever the rules and regulations are at the time, she will stick to them. She'll lead them, as she did all through the pandemic, and I'm sure that that's what she'll continue to do. My only fear for her is that, what with this lunch at Windsor Castle, it's not going to be. I'm sure the family are all desperate to join her and everything, but we're just going to have to wait and see. I think that the most important thing is Her Majesty's health. She's 95 years old. You cannot take any risks whatsoever.
No, and I would say everyone should be tested before they see the Queen for obvious reasons, but that is a sensible precaution. I think that's what we should all be doing. But I like her overall tone, which seems to be, let's get on with this safely. But in other royal news overnight, Jobbo, Sarah Ferguson has appeared on Italian television for a cringe-worthy interview where she says she stands 100% behind her ex-husband and current partner, Prince Andrew, who's facing a civil sexual assault case against him in the US. He denies all of those allegations, of course. But Fergie said, I believe the love I have for him and he has for me is just very different from what normal people have. We have great respect and love for each other. It really is our own fairy tale and it's our own lives. How we like to be with total respect and honour to each other. But as I've written in a new column for the Mail Online today, Jobbo, I haven't felt so queasy watching a disgraced royal on the telly since Randy Andy tried to defend his relationship with the depraved pedo Jeffrey Epstein to Emily Maitlis in that public life-ending Newsnight interview. I'm sorry, what's she talking about? She's saying, we have a love that's so much greater because we divorced and I'm standing by him despite his friendship with a pedo. I mean, it's just odd.
Well, I mean, the thing is with Sarah that you either love her or loathe her. I must admit, I have a soft spot for her. I think that she is, she comes out with things that are, somewhat daft sometimes. But the reality is this relationship that she's had with Andrew, and at the moment, of course, he's not guilty of anything apart from a misjudgment because nothing has been found against him. They have lived through. They basically are partners now, and they've lived through an intolerant time, if you like, during the 80s and the 90s when the press were pretty vitriolic against her in particular. So I think that there's two sides to it, really, Dan. I think they do have a special connection. We don't know. I mean, the reality is she is standing by Andrew 100%, and I think at this moment he needs all the people, all the friends he can get, because it's not looking that great for him.
Robert Jobson, thank you so much. We'll speak again next week, Jobbo. Coming up, after being thrust into the headlines by his lockdown Christmas event, former Tory London mayoral candidate Shaun Bailey breaks his silence at an exclusive interview with me at 10:20. But next, have politicians lost the will to reason with the public when they can just terrify them instead? Brendan O'Neill asks if Project Fair has been adopted for COVID straight after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The forecast for tomorrow will be similar for the next several days, actually. Dry for the vast majority, but also fairly drab. Won't be completely dry tomorrow. There will be some rain across the north of Scotland being created by this weather front. But it's high pressure that is starting to dominate across the south. And over the next few days, that high will continue to move northwards and control our weather through the weekend and beyond. That weather from those still providing some rain and drizzle over Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland through the rest of this evening. It's gradually going to work north overnight, so turning drier in Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, so maybe some drizzle over the mountains of Wales. Generally a lot of cloud here, but with some clearer skies across northeast England. Temperatures could get close to freezing, certainly in rural areas, and there could be some stubborn fog patches here, so through parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in particular. And if we do see some fog here, well, it may well last for much of Thursday. We should see that cloud and rain starting to pull away from northern Scotland, likely to stay fairly damp in Shetland for most of the day. But elsewhere, as I said at the start, it is generally cloudy but dry. Temperatures still a touch above average, although not quite as mild as today. And if that fog does stick around, well, temperatures could be very much more suppressed. Through Thursday evening, again, a few holes in the cloud could allow some fog patches to form, parts of North Wales and, again, the northeastern quarter of the UK. Generally just a lot of cloud across the south as we head into Friday. That weather front moving away from northern Scotland, so generally dry by the odd little bit of drizzle here and there. Again, some stubborn fog patches are possible on Friday. Again, some brightness, particularly across northern Scotland. Should be fairly sunny for the Highlands across to Aberdeenshire. North Wales also may well see some sunny spells, but for most places it's just looking overcast and grey, as it will do into the weekend. Increasing chance of seeing some thick fog, but generally staying dry and cloudy, but also steadily turning colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Brendan O'Neill is tonight's outsider. When Brexit became official on January the 31st, 2020, we hoped we'd finally seen the back of Project Fear. But less than 2 months later, the country was sent into its first lockdown in a bid to stave off the emerging threat of COVID. And once again, terror worked its way into the rhetoric of our politicians and elites. Now, Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked, believes it's the only language they understand. In his column, simply and effectively titled "We Can't Go On Like This," Brendan writes, Project Fear staggers on. Like COVID, it has mutated, but it has been a constant. The elites have entirely lost the ability and the will to reason with us. The impact this has on the practice of citizenship cannot be overstated. And Brendan O'Neill joins me now. Brendan, we had more of it today too. What's with this addiction to fear?
That's exactly what it is. It is an addiction. The elites, the political class, seem to be addicted to worst case scenario thinking, to using fear to try to marshal the population to make us do what it wants us to do. And it's a very destructive force, the politics of fear. Firstly, because it makes people feel scared. Secondly, it's the lowest form of politics. Instead of trying to engage with us about the reality of Omicron, which actually looks like a far weaker variant than Delta, which, according to Robert Dingwall, who was a former advisor to the government on COVID issues, he says it looks pretty much like flu in terms of how virulent it is. And so instead of engaging with us and reasoning with us about the truth of Omicron and the fact that it is not the end of the world as we know it, instead, they use fear, they use panic, they use dread. It's a really destructive form of political engagement.
And yet, we get more of it, Brendan. It's almost like sometimes I feel like we're in this post-truth existence because we actually have our leaders and our chief medical officers saying, don't look at the evidence, ignore what's happening in South Africa. I just find it completely bizarre.
It is bizarre. It's and they are doing exactly as you described. They're discouraging us from looking at the facts, and the facts in this case seem to be that this is a weaker variant. The risk of hospitalization is far lower than it was for the original COVID and for the Delta variant. And that is from real world studies. That's from looking at real world cases in South Africa. So if you look at the actual facts, there is no reason to panic. There is no reason to shut down society in the way that it looks like we might do in the next few weeks or months. And I think we have to really get a grip on what's happening here. What's happening here is that we are instituting extraordinary restrictions and a culture of fear in response to a virus that doesn't seem to have an extremely high death rate and doesn't seem to have a very high hospitalization rate. And the question on my mind is, are we going to do this all the time? Are we going to do this next time there is a big flu outbreak, which often kills thousands of people? Is this the new normal? That's the question we now need to ask ourselves, because if they can do this in response to Omicron, they can do it in response to any virus that emerges, and that should scare everyone.
Well, unfortunately, Brennan, I think it is, because I cannot understand why we're back in the same place, given all of the protections we have in terms of vaccination, antiviral drugs. So it really does feel like, for whatever reason, leaders have become addicted to this type of power and this type of control. I guess it's pretty surprising to me, though, if you look at this politically, Brendan, that Boris Johnson seems to have just dismissed the second biggest Tory rebellion since the war. I mean, he can't just dismiss this. His MPs are standing up and saying no to lockdowns, no to Plan C. But he said tonight at this press conference he ain't changing.
It's a huge rebellion, and I think it's a real blow to his moral and political authority. He might try to deny that. He might try to brush it under the carpet, but that is the truth of it. And the thing is, this addiction to fear, I think it's so apparent now, because if you look at the language that they're using in relation to Omicron, Boris has said there will be a tidal wave of Omicron. Nicola Sturgeon said there will be a tsunami of infections. They're using this terrifying language of these waves of disease washing over the nation. But as you say, the truth is huge numbers of us have been vaccinated. 95% of Brits have antibodies of one form or another. We know that Omicron the vaccines don't entirely protect against infection by Omicron, but they do seem to protect against serious illness. So this idea that we are just this shivering, scared populace facing this huge wave of disease and doom, that is, to all intents and purposes, that is a lie. That is simply not true. Our politicians are not telling us the truth of the situation that we are currently in. And that is something that should really anger citizens, when our politicians use fear and misinformation to try to cajole us to behave in a certain way.
Well, I'm furious. I'm absolutely incandescent. But the problem that you've got, Brendan, is you don't have any of the media challenging this. In fact, it's the complete opposite. We saw it again at today's press conference. The first two questions. Laura Kuenssberg from the BBC says, why aren't you introducing more restrictions for Christmas? Robert Peston from ITV, he's up next, and he suggests that the government should stop people going to the pubs. So it's almost like the media and the government are lockstep in terms of I think, marching us into a January lockdown almost inevitably.
If anything, the media is even worse than the political class, and they are playing the exact same role that they played during the first wave and the second wave and the third wave and all the other waves. The role they always play is the bang the drum of fear and say, where are the restrictions? Why aren't we locking down? Why aren't you being harsher on the population? The media has become so utterly conformist on the question of COVID and the question of lockdown. The only question they can think to ask the government is, why don't you punish the population even more? And it is such a lack of critical thinking, such a lack of critical curiosity about the truth of this variant. And I think the media should be ashamed of itself, because it is not doing its job properly. It is not doing justice by the people of this country who want answers to the questions of how serious the situation is and how destructive will these restrictions be. Those are the kind of questions the media should be asking.
And it's not like they don't have evidence of that, Brendan O'Neill. I mean, it literally makes me feel sick that we have Baby Star and we have Arthur, both victims of lockdowns because social services were unable to do their job because of the ridiculous restrictions. And, you know what, we report these stories, yet the teaching unions want to lock schools down again, and we're not properly examining the ramifications of locking down young people.
Absolutely. And, you know, the truth is, if you shut down society and you close down social networks and you prevent people from engaging with each other, that has severe consequences. And it particularly has consequences for vulnerable people who need social networks in order to survive and thrive. And when I read about little Arthur's uncle, who wanted to go around and visit him to see if he was okay. And the police said to his uncle, if you do that, if you break COVID restrictions, you could be arrested. This is the world we live in now. We live in a world in which even a loving uncle is prevented from going to look after a vulnerable child. And that is down to COVID restrictions, which are increasingly inhumane. They are separating us from each other. They are enforcing atomization. And I think they are destroying the social fabric itself. Those are the kinds of things journalists should be putting to the political class, asking those kinds of questions, and then we might finally get somewhere.
Brendan O'Neill, you're completely right. Thank you so much. We'll speak again next week. It's 10 p.m. The Tory Christmas party saga has been everywhere over the past few weeks, and in the next half hour, former Conservative London mayoral candidate Shaun Bailey will break his silence exclusively about his gathering, which he's described as a serious error of judgment. And he'll share his pain at having to step down from London's Police and Crime Committee. That coming up soon. Why are bitter Remoaners blaming Brexiteers for increased COVID deaths? And should jail have been the only option for drink and drug driving Katie Price, who today received a suspended sentence after a horror car crash that could have killed herself or others? My panel will be getting stuck into the big talking points of the day in the media buzz. Are woke remakes of classic works like Around the World in 80 Days destroying our culture? Rod Liddle hits back in Uncancelled. Plus, we'll bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages throughout this hour, and I'll crown a new Greatest Britain in Uni Jackass too. Lots to stay up for, but first, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening. These are your latest news headlines. The Prime Minister has warned the doubling rate of the Omicron variant is now under 2 days in some of the UK. Boris Johnson says there's also been a 10% rise in the number of people being admitted to hospital nationally week on week. So far, more than 78,600 daily COVID cases have been recorded. That's the highest daily figure since the pandemic began. However, Boris Johnson says there's no need to change our Christmas plans as long as we take precautions.
We're not cancelling events, we're not closing hospitality, we're not cancelling people's parties or their ability to mix. What we are saying is, think carefully before you go. Are you likely to meet people who are vulnerable? Get a test. And I think that is very, very good. Make sure that there's ventilation, wear a mask on transport, and get a test before you go.
Well, sports stadia have begun to implement new COVID regulations brought in to stem the spread of Omicron. The measures include showing proof of vaccination or a negative test result at venues with large crowds. These supporters arriving at Selhurst Park to watch Crystal Palace versus Southampton gave their view of the changes.
I think it's good for general health, otherwise there wouldn't be any games at all eventually, and we'd eventually have to watch it at home.
It's got to be done, isn't it, at the moment, to be honest with you, the way things are and the way it's spiking at the moment. So, yeah, I'll go along with it.
The diversionary tactics by the government, it's just trying to sort of look over here while we're doing different things over there, I mean, look how many people there are here tonight. If there was a real genuine problem with COVID, would this even be allowed?
Well, away from COVID, the woman who murdered 16-month-old Star Hobson in West Yorkshire has been jailed for life. 28-year-old Savannah Brockhill has been given a minimum term of 25 years. The toddler had been assaulted and psychologically abused for months before suffering catastrophic injuries which led to her death. Her mother and Brockhill's former partner, 20-year-old Frankie Smith, was cleared of murder but sentenced to 8 years for causing or allowing her child's death. And a double murderer who sexually abused the bodies of more than 100 women has been sentenced to a whole life term. 67-year-old David Fuller killed Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce before sexually assaulting them in 1987. He was caught 33 years later after a DNA breakthrough. 50 postmasters found to have been wrongly convicted in the Post Office IT scandal have received down payments of £100,000. The government says it's ahead of full compensation negotiations. Hundreds of people were prosecuted for theft, fraud and false accounting between 2000 and 2014 because of a faulty computer system. So far, 72 of them have had their convictions quashed. That's all from me. Now back to Dan Wootton and Tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our Media Buzz. First, look at the front pages hot off the press, and the Metro leads with that mortuary vulture and double murderer, David Fuller, who spent years abusing more than 100 corpses of women and girls in hospital mortuaries. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. Cut down on socialising to save Christmas, leads The Independent. It reports Chris Whitty's warning that Brits should deprioritise non-essential gatherings in order to preserve their family Christmas. Also in the paper, Hannah Fern writes of the pandemic's psychological toll, something callously ignored by lockdown fanatics in the media and the government. My superstar panel back with me now. The Daily Mail star columnist Amanda Platel, publican and social media sensation Adam Brooks, and the political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. Now, is there no place bitter Ramonas won't stoop as they try and score cheap victories after losing the biggest show of democracy of all time and then consistently fail to accept the result? It seems not, because a prominent anti-Leave campaign group, Best for Briton, has sparked fury after its Twitter accounts shared a tasteless study that linked areas that voted to leave the EU with a higher COVID death rate. Research by University of Oxford professor Ludovic Phalippou and Betty H2 Wu of the University of Glasgow. Amanda Platel, you are so immature. Shows boroughs like Boston and Hartlepool have two of the highest fatality rates from the virus in the UK, while also having had the biggest share of the vote for Brexit in 2016. By contrast, the 20 boroughs with the lowest death rates all voted heavily for Remain. The Sun's political editor Harry Cole described the study quite rightly as bottom feeder analysis. He added, they are driven so mad by Brexit they can't see how grim and stupid this looks/is. So, Adam Brooks, why are Ramonas callously linking Brexit supporters to higher COVID rates?
One word. Snobbery. You know, working class oiks like myself have never been forgiven. I think more importantly, working class areas are more densely populated. Probably there's more interactions. And I think this is really tasteless, really tasteless.
But also it's taking real statistics. I don't have a problem with the statistics. And doing 2 + 2 = 7.5. Because the reason that places that voted for Brexit very often was because they have low life expectancy, bad quality of life, wanted change, wanted something different. And the reason that those areas have low life expectancy and health inequalities, that's why you have a higher rate of COVID. And a lot of Brexiteers are anti-lockdown. That doesn't make them anti-vaccine. And all of these things are being conflated and confused.
But Daisy, also the other thing is that I think that a lot of people, and I completely accept what you say, Adam, I can't be an oik because I come from Australia. I don't know what that makes me, something slightly different.
A bogan.
But don't say that, Dan. That's like the worst thing.
What is a bogan?
A bogan is
a bit like a chav, but I think it's a good thing.
That is a porn feeder. OK, that's so cruel.
No, you like AC/DC and that sort of thing.
It doesn't. OK, the point is that a lot of people who voted for Brexit were actually older. They were over kind of 50 years old, so they're more likely to get COVID, more likely to die from it, because they're actually more sensible. A lot of them have gone through the war. A lot of them wanted to get their country back. A lot of them just felt really, really proud, as you say, Adam, you know, proud to be British, proud to want to restore their country. It's a horrible survey, and it should be ignored.
Yeah, I agree. And, Adam, I think it does show you, doesn't it, how craven these Ramonas are.
I'm still getting abuse on Twitter.
You are not. Still?
Still.
For the fact that you voted Brexit?
Yeah, and I was quite vocal as well with that. But at the end of the day, you know, the referendum happened. We have to respect the result. And Brexit got done, or is getting done, You know, and we've got to do it together.
500,000 people more employed now. We're outperforming Germany and France, lovely France. You know, our economy is thriving on the back of the new regulations that we've taken back to grow our own economy.
We knew there would be problems. We didn't vote this thinking it was going to be a smooth transition and there wasn't going to be problems, because we were told that there was going to be problems.
I know, but the reality is what Ramonas do is conflate the fact that we have been in a global pandemic where supply chains the world over have been disastrously affected with Brexit. Because I'm sorry, you go to the US right now and they have a complete lack of delivery drivers, HGV vehicles, for example. So too does China. It's nothing to do with Brexit. And I think actually this Best for Britain group is shameful for doing it.
But actually, it's quite dangerous. I think it's not just politicising something and conflating something that's not right, because there are reasons why pockets of the country have suffered much worse with COVID. A lot of them, you know,
deprived areas.
Exactly. Deprivation, poverty, health inequality, different NHS trusts being something better, something worse.
And age.
But also ethnicity has been a big thing. And if we ignore that and don't learn the lessons, you know, there was a report out last week that explained some of the problems is that, you know, that little thing you get put on your finger that measures your oxygen level.
I love those. I use it every night.
They don't work. They don't work.
Why?
They don't work properly on black skin. And that's one of the reasons that many BAME patients with COVID
Can't say BAME anymore.
Non-white patients, patients with darker skin, because it is about the
the BBC say you can't say BAME anymore.
Can we say it here?
But that's one of the reasons.
You can say whatever you want because this is GB News and we believe in freedom of speech. I don't like any of these acronyms. LGBTQI+. Go away.
I know.
BAME, go away. Let's just call people what they are.
Be yourself.
Yeah.
Be yourself.
Absolutely. Be yourself, and let's
He's so
worry
good,
about
isn't he?
labels. He's so good.
This new guy.
Labels are for cans of beans, right, Adam? That's what.
No comment.
Now, a crafty cat owner's video showing her pet hidden in a pile of fluffy toys. This is quite a change of pace, by the way. I should have warned you. Has gone viral after it perplexed its millions of viewers. So TikTok user Gosia said her landlord was coming for an inspection and she wasn't supposed to have had any pets. Oh my goodness, believe me, I have been there in the past. So she found an ingenious hiding spot for her cat, Larry. He's so hard to spot, though. Can you spot him? That people were actually convinced he's a hoax. I promise you, he is definitely there, though. Have you spotted Larry?
Yep.
You have, Daisy.
I have. I'm going to use, well, I don't know if we can go back. His little eyes. So as we go to the left.
Yeah.
No. That's not him, the one that looks like. He's underneath. Isn't he underneath there? You can just see. I think we've just gone past. You can just see his
we'll show you. Let's do the big reveal. Because I have to be honest,
neither of the
I did
cat's
not
toys.
spot it.
I didn't see it either.
Little white nose.
Where? I still can't see.
Between the two toys.
Did you see?
That's ingenious. Amanda, you've got a little puss. Would you be able to do this?
I do not have a little puss. Thank you very much.
We've got a photo of it.
Watershed.
We've got a photo of it. We're about to show a photo of your cat.
I have a lovely cat called Ted.
Hope it's trim.
I tried this experiment.
Okay.
I get
Can we
the
see
brief
how it
through,
went?
I look at it, I tried, and this is my cat when I'm trying to hide him under stuff. That's Bob the bear, and that's what they look like. That is what a live cat looks like, being, smothered by stuffed pets. I think there are drugs involved.
Ted
in
is
that,
lovely,
Dan.
but can I show you my little Dirk, who
I'd
also,
love
by the
to
way,
see
who
Dirk.
also
I'd love to
would
see Dirk.
never ever pose or
Could you
hide
get
for a
him to
long
do
period of
that?
time. No, but I recently
is that
was
good?
given by my partner this ridiculously huge fairgrounds sort of prize.
I'm very
and
glad
Dirk
to
was
see the
very
GB News
suspicious.
appropriate cushion.
Of course.
Very on
Union
brand.
Jack, the Union Jack. He's beautiful, isn't he?
How old
Absolutely
is he?
beautiful. He's 11 now, believe it or
Ted's
not.
only
11 in cat years, which I think makes him a middle-aged man now.
Makes him a bit younger than both of us, darling.
Amanda Purcell, Adam Brooks, Daisy McAndrew, do stand by, because coming up, Should jail have been the only option for drink and drug driving Katie Price after she benefited from what I would describe a bit of celebrity justice today? I'll put that to my panel as the Media Buzz continues. Plus, we'll reveal more of today's newspaper front pages. But next, former Tory London mayoral candidate Shaun Bailey breaks his silence over his Christmas gathering storm and shares his hopes for forgiveness in an exclusive interview. Stay tuned for that straight after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The forecast for tomorrow will be similar for the next several days, actually. Dry for the vast majority, but also fairly drab. Won't be completely dry tomorrow. There will be some rain across the north of Scotland being created by this weather front. But it's high pressure that is starting to dominate across the south. And over the next few days, that high will continue to move northwards and control our weather through the weekend and beyond. That weather from those still providing some rain and drizzle over Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland through the rest of this evening. It's gradually going to work north overnight, so turning drier in Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, so maybe some drizzle over the mountains of Wales. Generally a lot of cloud here, but with some clearer skies across northeast England. Temperatures could get close to freezing, certainly in rural areas, and there could be some stubborn fog patches here, so through parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in particular. And if we do see some fog here, well, it may well last for much of Thursday. We should see that cloud and rain starting to pull away from northern Scotland, likely to stay fairly damp in Shetland for most of the day. But elsewhere, as I said at the start, it is generally cloudy but dry. Temperatures still a touch above average, although not quite as mild as today. And if that fog does stick around, well, temperatures could be very much more suppressed. Through Thursday evening, again, a few holes in the cloud could allow some fog patches to form, parts of North Wales and again, the northeastern quarter of the UK. Generally just a lot of cloud across the south as we head into Friday. That weather front moving away from northern Scotland, so generally dry by the odd little bit of drizzle here and there. Again, some stubborn fog patches are possible on Friday. Again, some brightness, particularly across northern Scotland. Should be fairly sunny for the Highlands across to Aberdeenshire. North Wales also may well see some sunny spells, but for most places it's just looking overcast and grey, as it will do into the weekend. Increasing chance of seeing some thick fog, but generally staying dry and cloudy, but also steadily turning colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinions. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Former Tory London mayoral candidate Shaun Bailey has apologised after a photo emerged last night of him posing with 23 guests at a Christmas gathering held in his campaign office last year. The rising star in the Conservative Party described the event on December the 14th, held when London was in Tier 2, which banned households from mixing indoors, as a serious error of judgment at a time when Londoners were making immense sacrifices to keep us all safe. Shaun, who subsequently stepped down from London's Police and Crime Committee, added, "I regret it wholeheartedly." Now, Shaun, as you know, is a member of our Dan Wootton Tonight family. You've regularly seen him appear on our Superstar panel. So to explain exactly what went on and how it feels to have become the subject of what seems like a political grudge match, he joins me now. So, Shaun, the first thing I think that is most important in these situations is just to explain very clearly what happened that night.
Okay.
Was it a pre-planned party or was it a work event that turned into something else?
Look, the first thing to say is I want to start with an apology. Whatever happened, it was an error of judgment. So I want to own that. I've had a young team. They've been working very hard for months at a time. And I came back from an event and they were there all set up, sort of ready to go. And I spoke to them and then we took the infamous photo. I wish at that point I had said, hold on a second, we're straying here, we're going too far. But I didn't. And I want to own that because, yes, I had senior members of the team, but it is my team and I should have owned that. So I want to just take that on board. I think the other thing to say was we were in a workplace bubble. We were working together. It felt quite natural. I had been, earlier that day, I had a really busy day. So I'd just come from a string of 4 interviews. I'd come back, to look at some paperwork to go off to be on Newsnight. So I tootled off on Newsnight. So I wasn't there long, but the point was I was there long enough and I could have and should have said, hold on, chaps, girls, we're going the wrong way with this. Let's move back.
Because to clarify, Shaun, you leave and the party seems to become quite wild. And this is a fact, there have been 4 members of your team disciplined officially.
Yeah, that's correct.
Doors were kicked in. But what you're saying is that happened after you left. When you were there, it wasn't this raucous party.
No, look, you remember when I was on Nigel's show, I don't even drink, I'm teetotal. So I've come back in a work mode because I'm trying to think about going on Newsnight. And they had some nibbles and I spoke to the team, thank you boys, thank you girls for all the work you'd done. And then they went on and went long late into night. But the point is, I could have been part of the process of stopping it and I wasn't. I could have said to them, actually, nibble at your desk. You know what I mean? Let me make sure you're finished by the time I'm done at Newsnight. I could have said 100 things, but I didn't. Focused on work, whatever. And these things happened, and CCHQ stepped in. They stepped in. They stepped in and said, "Look, we're going to have to discipline some people," and they went ahead and disciplined people. And it was the right thing to do. Those people have been very contrite. They've said, "Yes, we put the hands up." CCHQ came down quite heavily on people, and we're all moving on.
Because, Shaun, do you understand why people are so angry about this? It's not because of what you did. It's because of who you all are. You were representatives of the Tory government, essentially, who had locked the rest of us down, who had stopped us from seeing dying relatives, who had stopped us from socialising with our loved ones at Christmas. And that's where the rage comes from. There's a feeling, and you can tell me if this is true or not, but there's a feeling that there was almost like a complete and total disregard for the rules among Tory staff members, and especially those staff members connected to...
What I will say, I certainly felt, and I really do understand the anger, because you saw people who didn't see their parents, who couldn't see their children, all kinds of things. I remember so many of our own team are staying in London because they couldn't go home to their parents and all sorts. So that I fully understand where the anger comes from. But that's where the apology comes from. I'm only a person, I'm not perfect, I missed that opportunity to do the right thing. And that's why I wanted to sort of come out and say, look, there's 100 different reasons. I could say I was busy, I could say I was in the room for 10 minutes, but that's not the point. The point is I want to apologise, because this isn't about, you know, like you said, what I'd done. It's about who I am and what we as a country were being asked to do. And I failed in my duty in that, and I have absolutely no problem at all apologising for that.
Do you think that your campaign at the time should have been public about what happened, been completely transparent, given these people were disciplined? Because, you know, in all of these cases, Shaun, sometimes it's the cover-up that is worse than the crime, and it feels like you sort of hoped you were going to get away with this.
It wasn't so much that we hoped you were going to get away. You could always be more public. Let me make that point. You could always be, but I'd have loved to have said, look, this is what's gone on. People were disciplined. It took time to get to that point, because we had to find out just exactly how long this has gone on. Was it organised? Who was in charge? Who was going to take responsibility for this? And CCHQ rode in very quickly, but it had to be thorough, because these people are actual employees. So you can't just willy-nilly point people out. You have to do them properly.
Was some of the people in that photo from number 10, were they staff members at number 10?
No, if there's one thing in the photo that is good, is evidential. There's nobody there from any other place other than my team. And you then had...
And some of them had been seconded.
Yeah, they've been seconded across.
Okay.
No, they've been seconded from
the Conservative Party.
From CCHQ. They've been seconded to my team, and we absorbed them. They were fully functioning team members. So I didn't even want to say, well, you from CCHQ. I didn't think that was fair. I felt like, look, we'd adopted you. You'll take the rise and the fall with us.
And look, you've had to take a real hit as a result of this. The media coverage has been brutal. There's been a lot of criticism of you personally. And then today you had to stand down as chair of the police committee in the London Assembly. Can you just explain how that all came about?
I stood down a few days ago now, and that's... Look, the real thing is this. So many people supported me, you know. I couldn't go anywhere in London without someone coming up and saying, Shaun, you're the guy, thank you, I love you, your fresh start, I love you and alternatives, you know, go, go, go. That's why I stood down, because I was elected to the London Assembly, but also I was the mayoral candidate, and I got 45% of the vote. Some polls had me down at 23%. I absolutely smashed.
You came close to a massive upset.
And that for me is the huge failing. For those people, they'll look at this and say, Shaun, I thought you was our guy, and I want to continue to be their guy. So that's why I stood down. And the additional piece to that is two additional pieces. One, my colleagues. My colleagues are a great bunch, and they're going to have a rough ride with me, and they didn't deserve that. And I wanted to show them that I'm serious about being contrite. I'm not just saying nice words. It's a big loss. Yeah. So I stood down.
You're a big supporter of the Prime Minister. Have you apologised personally to him, and have you spoken to him since these revelations emerged?
So I've written to the PM and said, look, I'm sorry. He'll write back to me. We sort of have a pace at which we can write to and fro, because obviously the man's running the country. He'll write back to me. But I get the distinct impression he's a little bit disappointed with what I did. I'm disappointed with what I did. But he feels like, to me, one of the people I let down. I mean, my mum sent me a text, and I'm a teeny bit of a mum's boy. If my mum said something, it's kind of impactful for me. She said, I hope this is not true. And I had to go back and say, I was there. I have an uncle called Dennis who's taken our granddad to hospital, and he texted me from the hospital saying, I hope this party stuff isn't true, and I had to go back and say, unfortunately, it is. And
so letting down your family is almost the worst thing, almost worse than letting down the PM.
I'd say one thing, letting down the activists. There's people up and down London who've never done any political activity before, who gave me money so I could print leaflets, delivered those leaflets, supported me on Twitter. That's the pleasure and the burden of being in this position.
But look, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I've made a lot of them. And I think one of the most important things is about owning those mistakes. And obviously, I think you still have a really big political future ahead of you. I presume you're not going to let this stop you go on with that goal.
It would take more than this to stop me. I'm only a man, I'm not perfect. I never purported to be perfect. Yes, I wish this hadn't happened, but it has. But what I want to do is deliver for London. I mean, half the reason the heat has been so high, yes, because people think, well, we were in tier 2. But either it's because there's political forces who want to remove me. They know the scrutiny that I've brought to the mayor's crime plan is blazing hot for him. They know that they voted for me, they want me to represent them. Because, as you all know, my politics is about people who have to work for a living. If you lose a week's wages and it makes a difference to you, I'm your guy. I want to make sure that you can feed your kids. I want to make sure you can live somewhere safe. And this pressure cooker I'm in, this mistake I made, does not change that. I still want to do well for people.
And you'll be back on our Superstar panel in 2022?
I'm sure I will, thank you.
Excellent. Shaun Bailey, look, thank you so much for coming to talk to us about what went on. Now, are woke remakes of classic works like Around the World in 80 Days destroying our culture? Rod Liddell thinks so, and he's got plenty to say on that in Uncancelled shortly. But next, should Katie Price have been jailed today for drink driving rather than becoming the latest beneficiary of what I describe as celebrity justice? And is it fair for J.K. Rowling to be erased from her latest movie trailer? I'll ask my panel and bring you more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages as the Media Buzz continues.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. Lots of front pages just being delivered, so let me get straight to them. Scale back Christmas plans, says the Daily Telegraph. It reports the public are being urged to cut back on socialising in the run-up to Christmas, with England's chief medical officer suggesting people should only attend events they consider a priority. Don't mix with your friends if you don't have to, warns the Eye. Isn't that joyful? Parroting today's government briefing on Omicron. Past the paper carries an exclusive with Labour leader Keir Starmer, who predicts voters will no longer give Boris the benefit of the doubt. He hopes so anyway. The Daily Express wishes everyone a very sensible Christmas, the best kind, following pleas for people to have a long, hard think about what social interactions they have. Plus, millions face a cost of living crisis after inflation soars to a 10-year high, arguably the most important story on that front page. Aliens are among us, say the Daily Star. Sorry, this has just come in. The paper reports Danny Dyer says there is no doubt there is extraterrestrial life. I don't agree with much that Danny Dyer says, but I certainly agree with him on this. Of course aliens are among us. I don't believe that's even a question. Tonight's Superstar panel here too, Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, the publican and Essex social media sensation Adam Brooks. Oh, really?
Dan is a customer.
He's your customer. Yeah. And political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. Now, the world's most famous glamour model, Katie Price, avoided jail today despite admitting drink and drug driving while disqualified and without insurance following a crash. The former model was given a 16-week suspended sentence at Crawley Magistrates Court after smashing her car near Partridge Green in West Sussex while under the influence of cocaine and alcohol in September. She was also sentenced to 100 hours of unpaid work and 20 sessions of rehab with probation after District Judge Amanda Kelly said that her actions were selfish and could have killed someone. Katie has now been banned from driving on 5 separate occasions and was driving while disqualified after a 2-year ban in 2019. Judge Kelly described her driving record as one of the worst she had ever seen. She added, "Not everybody has the luxury of being able to check into the Priory. It seems you think you're above the law. The public may be appalled to know that I'm not able to send you to prison today to spend Christmas behind bars. The law says you have a legitimate expectation you will be not sent to prison today." Surely a custodial sentence was necessary. No, there is no excuse for that sort of driving rap sheet, and this seems to be a clear case of celebrity justice that could put the public in danger. I mean, I'm fond of Katie, but she's going to kill someone or herself because she refuses to accept she needs serious long-term help. And I think jail would have been the wake-up call she needs to change. Actually, The Sun agree with me. Their front page has just dropped too, and it says, "What price justice? Get off your face on booze and drugs, drive while banned, overturn your car, then end up with a nice trip to Vegas and a little spell in rehab." Adam Brooks, you know Katie Price a little bit. Am I being unfair on her?
I don't know her. She's been a customer of mine in the past. I disagree with you, Dan. I think as long as she was treated as everyone else would be treated, then her celebrity status is, it doesn't matter. We
can't all afford a little spell in the Priory.
No, we can't. No, but we also, would they have sent Susan from Romford to prison today for the same thing?
I think they would have.
I think they would have.
I think being a celebrity, it's probably more likely that she would have gone to prison to make a point, personally. But
do you disagree, Amanda?
I'm afraid, Adam, completely and utterly.
First time tonight.
Jesus, you're a mum of 5 kids. You've got a severely handicapped child, a blind Harvey, who is a marvel the way she's looked after him. She's got responsibilities apart from just being a human being. If I did that, come on, Dan. If Amanda Platel, high on cocaine, which I never take, high on booze, which I occasionally do. Smash my car, I would...
You'd be going down.
I'd be sweeping the streets.
You'd be doing time.
I'd be sweeping the streets, baby. I would not be here on your show. It's just one set of rules for...
I think that's a major point that, she is the carer to Harvey. And would we want that boy to suffer?
All the more reason that she should be more responsible about her life.
She's done wrong. Okay. She's done wrong, and now clearly...
All I'm telling you, Adam, is if she had killed a friend or a family member of me, I would want her to go down. She has had last chance saloon time after time after time.
That is 100% true, but she didn't.
Even if she'd killed lovely Spark.
Well, I was just going to say, Daisy McCadden, who do we have here?
What? Yes, I'm sorry, he has... Well, I have brought him on. This is Sparky, who's Tibetan Terrier.
He doesn't so well behaved.
He doesn't like being alone. And I'm sure that he probably, as Amanda said, would have an opinion on Katie Price. But I actually agree with Adam more that I don't think prison is the right place for anybody like that. I think she clearly needs to be in rehab. Now, just because she can afford it doesn't mean that other people like Katie Price should be in prison or rehab. They should all be in rehab. They should be made to do community
Rubbish,
service.
It's not working.
They should be made to
Katie
change
Price
their ways.
didn't go to the Priory to change. She went to the Priory to escape punishment, and she can afford to do so. And I actually like the woman, but she's going to kill someone because she's not going to take this seriously.
She hasn't. And
she hasn't yet.
She hasn't hurt anyone here.
She hasn't yet. And she's very lucky she didn't.
And while we're on the Priory, no one goes into the Priory if you wanted to be kept secret, okay?
No, indeed, she wanted everyone to know. Because she wanted everyone to know, didn't she? So that she got out of prison.
Like 7 days.
Got out of a jail sentence, which is exactly what happened.
You.
Now, look, a woke producer's trying to erase any trace of J.K. Rowling from her own creative achievements because of her views on gender identification. Certainly seems to be the case because the Harry Potter author has effectively been written out of her own Fantastic Beasts film trailer amid a row over her views of trans identification and her concerns about the tension between women's rights and trans rights. See if you can spot the difference between the trailer for the third instalment of the Fantastic Beasts franchise, The Secrets of Dumbledore, and the 2018 trailer.
To save the world, are we? Things are not quite what they appear.
So you may have noticed the caption J.K. Rowling invites you has been changed to Warner Brothers invites you. There's the difference. So Rowling's name largely erased from a trailer advertising a film she wrote and produced. I think that's outrageous. I will note too, you won't see any Johnny Depp in the new trailer, but that's a whole other story too. And I'm not even going to go there tonight. Amanda Platel, Adam Brooks, Daisy McAndrew, do stand by. Sparky, you stand by too, please, and behave, because Rod Liddle will not be impressed if he barks throughout uncancelled.
Or cries.
Yeah. Because coming up is Matt Hancock, the most deluded man in Britain for thinking he could be Prime Minister. We'll debate that as I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. And next, as the BBC prepares to launch a woke remake of Around the World in 80 Days, the aforementioned Rod Liddle says hands off our classics. He's here next in Uncancelled. First, though, very quick look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, will Omicron derail another season of the Premier League? Former England footballer and vaccine passport opponent Matt Letizia shares his fears. Plus, GBNews star Mark Dolan and political firebrand Anne Widdecombe sound off on the topics that matter to you. And I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. Making her debut, the Loose Women star and broadcaster Carol McGiffin, the Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and the author and journalist Amy Nicol. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. When audiences sit down to enjoy a new BBC adaptation of Jules Verne's epic adventure around the world in 80 days this festive season, I can guarantee what they'll be thinking. God, I hope we get an exploration of colonialism and Victorian-era racial and sexual politics. Not. That's what its star David Tennant believes anyway, though. Speaking to the Radio Times, he said of his globe-trotting protagonist, who first appeared in print in 1872, in many ways, Phileas Fogg represents everything that's alarming and peculiar about that old sense of British Empire. Potentially, it's a story about an England that should elicit very little sympathy. Verne chooses to make Phileas Fogg a particularly stuffy Englishman. We're showing a different type of stuffy Englishman. He's very damaged. Everything is a trauma for him. Well, tonight, Rod Liddle says enough with woke remakes ruining cultural classics. And he joins me now. Rod Liddle, this is so typical, isn't it? It's so typical. David Tennant and the BBC can't just make a proper adaptation of Around the World of 80 Days. They've got to turn it woke.
Of course they have.
I'm looking for a faithful adaptation.
A faithful adaptation. No, they couldn't possibly do that. And it's such a great story. You know, it's exactly the sort of story and exactly the sort of grand production that the BBC could do very, very well. Get all the family round, listening to it, watching it, about a wager that is laid, a great story by Jules Verne about a man who has to get around the world in 80 days, has various incredible mishaps as he goes around the world, just about manages to do it. You know, it's just a magnificent story. But no, I know you keep a really tight ship on this programme, Dan, and it's got to be fit for public viewing. Obviously it has. But reading what David Tennant said, what an incredibly pompous tit that man is. I mean, the self-obsession, the narcissism that comes through. We're going to make Phileas Fogg, this is the hero of it, a damaged individual who has suffered trauma. I mean, get a grip. And the problem is that it's a kind of double hypocrisy. I don't mind if David Tennant and the people who produced this want to make a story about a damaged individual who shows up the British Empire for being vile and repulsive. Their own story. They can do that. But they won't do it. And the reason they won't do it is because they know that nobody in their right minds would watch it. So what they do is they piggyback upon a programme, upon a piece of work which they know is very popular, which they know will draw audiences in, and they use that to ram their own fatuous opinions down everybody's throat. And of course, it's far from being the first time they've done this. There was a production a couple of years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, of Watership Down, which I really enjoyed reading as a 13, 14-year-old kid. And suddenly we were faced with a Watership Down in which there were a new cohort of rabidly feminist rabbits, female rabbits, who just figured nowhere in the original version of Watership Down. And not only that, but Strawberry, one of the rabbits, seemed to have been transgendered in the new version of Watership Down. And again, I have no objection. If they want to write a story about extremely feminist rabbits and a transgendered rabbit, go ahead and do it. But don't spoil the memory and don't betray the truth of the original stories that were written, because that's what they're doing.
And this is a world, Rod, where you even have Barbara Broccoli, the woman who's meant to be protecting the legacy of James Bond, saying that the next Bond could be non-binary. So it's hardly a surprise, is it? Hollywood's gone nuts when it comes to identity politics.
Well, it has, but it's even, yes, and of course, that's the obvious thing. The James Bond thing was always going to be up for the woke to get their teeth into, and so it has proved. And Doctor Who, of course, was a great example of a series which children throughout the years loved and adored, and I did when I was 7 and 8 and 9 and everything. And then recent versions of it have been this kind of woke fest. The one which came out in 2016, 2017, even had digs at Brexit in it, and suggestions that Britain couldn't act alone and all that kind of stuff. And what was the consequence of that? The consequence of that was that nobody watched it. The viewing figures for Doctor Who fell off the edge of a cliff, and this is what I mean. That in a sense, they're not merely trying to ram their own opinions down our throats. They're also cheating the audience, because the audience tunes in to watch something which will be fun, which will be around the world in 80 days, a great fun story, and instead they're treated to the asinine political viewpoints of pygmies such as David Tennant.
And Rod, I also just have an issue about historical accuracy as well, because it feels like period dramas these days, Bridgerton, for example, are being written as if they take place in 2021.
Well, no, that's exactly right. Because history these days is viewed solely through the narrow prism of identitarian politics. It's stripped of all nuance, it's stripped of all context, it's stripped, therefore, of all truth and reality. Because the past wasn't like that. The past wasn't seen solely through the view of identitarian politics. Things were different then, and we have to make certain contextual allowances for it. So no, they're rewriting history, and they're managing to make history boring, desperately earnest and boring. As soon as I read that stuff from David Tennant, I knew that I wouldn't watch this Phileas Fogg. which otherwise I would have watched because it might have been good
But it's
fun.
amazing, Rod, isn't it, how quickly this has all changed? I mean, for me, and you might disagree with this, but I say hands down the greatest TV drama of all time is Mad Men. And, you know, that was only made a decade ago. And you just cannot imagine Hollywood now making a major drama series where the protagonist is a very flawed, straight white male who shags lots of women and has homophobic and racist views, even though he was a man of his time, Don Draper, in the 50s and 60s. It simply wouldn't be made today.
It simply wouldn't be made today. And it's interesting, actually, because one of the series I've been watching over with my wife at home is the 1970s, 80s series Lou Grant, which was about a journalist. And I used to fancy myself as a main reporter in the story when I was 19 and 20 and starting out as a journalist. And that was considered at the time to be an incredibly left-wing programme. And it was eventually taken off air by NBC because it was so left-wing. It wouldn't get made today because we have shifted so much further to the left that all the stuff in there, all the patriarchal business, all the way in which women are referenced, in which gay people are referenced and so on, it simply wouldn't be made today. And that was the most left-wing drama of its time in the 1970s and 80s.
Rod Little, fascinating stuff as always. We'll speak again next week. Rod, thank you so much for joining us. But time now to reveal today's greatest Briton in Union Jackass. The superstar panel are back with me. Amanda Platel. Shall we kick off with you? Who's your nomination for Greatest Briton this evening?
After that, it's Rod Little. But
you agree with him?
I totally agree. But my first choice was actually Dominic Raab, Deputy Prime Minister in name, but who's ditching out Article 8 of the Human Rights Act and saying you can no longer claim, if you're a foreigner, convicted rapist or murderer, that you can live in this country forever if you have a cat called Mila.
Adam Brooks, your nomination.
For Greatest Briton is Steve Baker, Conservative MP, Rebel.
Now, you've done this to redeem yourself, haven't you, Adam?
I called him Steve Barclay last night.
We all watched the Farage show.
Yeah, no, he's really given a voice to, you know, people like myself in hospitality, people that do not want an authoritarian future.
He's a great man. He's a very great man. But you did get his name wrong last night. We have to be honest.
It was nerves. It was nerves, Dan. I'm not used to all this media attention.
Well, you're doing very well. You're doing incredibly well tonight. Daisy McAndrew, your Greatest Briton nominee.
Dan, I have stuck with the canine theme tonight, having brought Sparky into the studio.
He's behaving.
I am
Stay
nominating
quiet.
a canine Greatest Briton who is called Blinky, and that's Blinky on the screen there, who saved 2 lives this week. He was on a canal boat with his owners, sleeping, never barks apparently, like Sparky, fingers crossed, and then started barking in the middle of the night to alert his sleeping owners that 2 men had fallen into the canal and were swiftly dying of hypothermia, and they were saved, and they're in hospital, but they're OK. So Blinky is mine.
What a great story. All good nominations today, but I'm absolutely going to go with Adam Brooks. I think Steve Baker has been a complete hero this week. He is a freedom fighter. And right now, he's really the leader of the opposition, which is quite an extraordinary thing. Union Jackass time, though. Amanda Patel, who's your nomination?
OK, this is a real person, but no, not someone anyone will know. Last night I got home from a party and there was a man who was stealing the squirrels off my Christmas tree in the front garden. And then the
Is that it there?
That is exactly it. There's not a picture of him. And what happened was the cab driver...
It's extraordinary.
As he was very gentlemanly, he leapt out as well and said, let's make a citizen's arrest. And we did that, and we said, we're arresting you for stealing squirrels from Amanda's Christmas tree.
Squirrel stealer.
So you caught him?
And Danny burst into tears. Oh. And I felt so sorry for him. I said, we're not going to arrest you. And I gave him one little hedgehog, which I didn't really like.
But why was he stealing your squirrels?
Because he's not very British, because he's a jackass.
Nope, very good nomination. If random, Adam Brooks, who's your Union Jackass nominee?
Matthew Hancock. He's the most deluded, cringiest man in politics.
He was on the red carpet at the weekend, Adam. But
Look at him in his turtleneck.
You think it's extraordinary that he fancies himself to replace Boris Johnson, right?
He certainly fancies himself, as we see with all the set-up pat pictures last year. But no, if he thinks he could be the Prime Minister of this country, there's no hope. There's no hope.
Daisy McAndrew, your nomination for Union Jackass.
My jackass, and this isn't because Adam's on the panel tonight, but I think he will approve, is all those horrible, moronic people that keep not turning up to their restaurant bookings or their pub bookings without even calling. Bad enough that restaurants and pubs like Adam's have lost thousands of pounds, but if you don't even tell that person that you're not coming, how can they possibly book somebody else in? I think it's literally adding insult to injury.
Thank you.
I'm with you, actually. They absolutely have to be tonight's Union Jackass, because just try and keep the booking, I would say. If you're not going to keep the booking, cancel. It's very simple, isn't it?
It's just so rude and financially damaging.
It's tough enough at the moment.
Yeah.
Adam, where's your pub?
Buckhurst Hill.
OK, what's it called?
Called the Three Colts. And I've got another one called the Owl, which is lovely. It's in the forest, so...
Oh, like that owl that was nicked off my Christmas tree.
Just like that, yeah. Very family-friendly and dog-friendly as well, so...
So Sparky could come.
Yeah,
well,
please
look,
book.
Adam Brooks, you've made a brilliant debut as part of my Superstar panel. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, too, to Amanda Patel and Daisy McAndrew. I'm not going to see both of you until next year, so Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. Let's hope we can celebrate. But I will be back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Thank you for your company tonight. It's time for Headliners now. Good night.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The forecast for tomorrow will be similar for the next several days, actually. Dry for the vast majority, but also fairly drab. Won't be completely dry tomorrow. There will be some rain across the north of Scotland being created by this weather front. But it's high pressure that is starting to dominate across the south, and over the next few days that high will continue to move northwards and control our weather through the weekend and beyond. That weather from those still providing some rain and drizzle over Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland through the rest of this evening. It's gradually going to work north overnight, so turning drier in Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, so maybe some drizzle over the mountains of Wales. Generally a lot of cloud here, but with some clearer skies across northeast England. Temperatures could get close to freezing, certainly in rural areas, and there could be some stubborn fog patches here, so through parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in particular. And if we do see some fog here, well, it may well last for much of Thursday. We should see that cloud and rain starting to pull away from northern Scotland, likely to stay fairly damp in Shetland for most of the day. But elsewhere, as I said at the start, it is generally cloudy but dry. Temperatures still a touch above average, although not quite as mild as today. And if that fog does stick around, well, temperatures could be very much more suppressed. Through Thursday evening, again, a few holes in the cloud could allow some fog patches to form, parts of North Wales and, again, the northeastern quarter of the UK. Generally just a lot of cloud across the south as we head into Friday. That weather front moving away from northern Scotland, so generally dry by the odd little bit of drizzle here and there. Again, some stubborn fog patches are possible on Friday. Again, some brightness, particularly across northern Scotland. Should be fairly sunny for the Highlands across to Aberdeenshire. North Wales also may well see some sunny spells.